Let's get started. Can you hear me okay?
No, it's a little quiet.
I'm a little quiet? Words I have never heard before. Appreciate that. I'm Mike Rosen. I am your mayor. Thank you. Before we get started, a couple shout outs. Carolyn and Larry Lefebvre are celebrating their anniversary and decided to do it here. And Janice Carr decided to celebrate her birthday with us tonight. So anybody interested in having a state of the city at your birthday or anniversary, wedding? I'm your guy. I'm totally in. We have some council members here. I would ask that you all stand so that people can see you and recognize you, and thank you for being council members. Thank you. We also have a few current and former elected officials here. If you would stand, please. I see a mayor. I see another mayor. I see a port commissioner. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And if there are any board or commission members in the house, would you guys stand and be recognized for volunteering as well? One over there. Thank you. So tonight's going to be a lot about numbers. Here's 3 of them. This is a monitor so I can see what's on the screen, so I don't have to turn around every time. If you're wondering why I keep looking down, it's so I know what you're looking at. Edmonds has been a city for 134 years. We've been around that long. I am your 37th mayor, and this is my 88th of 1,246 days. So I beat the 90-day update. This is not at all the kind of message I was hoping to deliver in my first state of the city. You know, I have been to others, and they talk about all the wonderful things going on, and we have all sorts of wonderful things going on, and I hope we can get to there, but this is not what I had hoped our first conversation would be. This is me sharing information, having the kind of conversation that I think as residents we want. Just tell us what's going on, don't sell it, don't mask it, just talk to us. And as anybody who knows me knows, I'm also not very diplomatic at doing that. So that's what this is me talking to you. The presentation is just me. It's everything I tell people not to do. Don't have one person talk. Don't put a lot of words on the screen. Don't read what's on the screen. So I'm doing all of those. And there is no inspiring warm-up speaker. And, and there's going to only be 3 pretty pictures. This is number 1, to remind us of where we live and what we love. You know, we do have a lot of great stories, and I do look forward to doing it, and maybe we can do a State of the City episode 2 at some point, but today is not that. This is, 3, I think, important words: transparency, respect, and trust. The transparency is sort of my side of this equation, is me just talking to you and giving information that I hope you want and will appreciate having. The respect and trust is the other way that I don't think often enough we give community members respect and trust. And I have huge amounts of trust and respect for this community and the individuals in it, and how you can use this kind of information and how we'll all be better because you have it. So this is, I don't think that happens enough from government, is just giving straight out information, good news or bad news to the community. So we're going to test that with bad news tonight. So tonight we're talking about the general fund. The city has lots of funds and lots of different revenues, but this is about the general fund. This is where the money goes that keeps the machine running. And that's what we're going to talk about. And I fully expect that when this is done tonight, nobody's going to be satisfied. Some of you are going to say, oh gosh, Rosen, that was a lot. Some are going to say, why didn't you talk about this? And there wasn't enough detail. And that was really dry. Could we have had a warm-up speaker and maybe a few more pretty pictures? And I have lots of questions. And so I don't think anybody's going to walk out of there and say, that was just perfect. I won't be taking questions tonight, partly because it is a lot to absorb, and because there are those of you who are going to want to hone in on a very specific thing, and other people will want to talk about other things. And then my guess is that we'll drift into why do the train horns not work, and what's up with the comp plan, and really who made up those numbers. So I think it'll be good for us to absorb this. And then I will be, council will be rolling up their sleeves and looking at all that I'm talking about today and even more on Tuesday. So I encourage you to participate in that and also make comments or put yourself on the record then. I will also be at the Edmonds Civic Roundtable in this room on April 4th, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions about anything and everything that you might want to ask about at that time. And then I will talk about it later, but we are looking to have, as a part of this process, moving forward, some community meetings, and I'll talk about those as well. I want to make it clear that this is not about laying blame. When you talk about things like this, it's sort of easy to say, to want to lay blame. And as you will see, a lot of things got us here, not one thing got us here. And so I really encourage us to just, here's what it is, now what do we do with that? And so, as opposed to trying to go down that hole of laying blame. So that's why it's bolded and bigger. This is where I was, where you on January 1st, to sort of, we all knew that the general fund was headed into trouble, and that was a path that had been going on for a little bit of time. We know that the city council declared a fiscal emergency, and that there were significant one-time funds used to balance the budget. And as a result of that, I believe there was some anger and some compromised confidence that went in a number of different directions. So I think that, in my mind, that was our reality starting on January 1st. I believe things like this, times like this, are an opportunity. They force us to ask the hard questions. When you're faced with these kinds of realities, you really do have to sit down and identify what's important to you and ask yourselves the right kind of questions. And in my life, nobody ever called up and said, Rosen, can you make tomorrow just like today? We are in the change business. That's what cities do, is help provide for a better future and learn from what we've done in the past, and can we do it any better? And we're in a position now to take a hard look at ourselves and what the city does and how we do it. And so I do look at this as an opportunity. So before January 1st, as council was making the decisions that they were making, I started to ask 4 questions. And right after the election was done, those questions became much tighter to me. So first is, where are we? We need some confidence in our reality today. What are the hard numbers? The next is, how did we get here? The next is, how do we get out of here? And then, how do we prevent this from happening again? And ultimately, we need to be looking further. We need to have financial resiliency and sustainability. Because otherwise, if we just get out of the hole, we're just where we were. We need to have a plan that says, okay, what does government look like? And what does that cost? And how and I'll talk more about this. But we need a path to financial resiliency so we don't have this kind of conversation again. So to do that, everything I approach, it's who is smarter than me and how do I get them to say yes to helping me. If any of us were in the room and I was the smartest person in the room, one of us is in the wrong room. So this was me looking at who could help us out of this. And so to recruit the volunteer blue ribbon panel, and there are many in the room, if you guys wouldn't mind standing up so people can see who you are and that you're here. And thank you for your service. So they are all volunteers from the region. Mike Bailey is the exception. He's the handsome guy in the upper left-hand corner. He is a consultant. My criteria was, who are people who have had financial responsibilities and done this in cities? Who has audited cities and know what questions to ask and where to look and where things hide? Who is it that have managed monster budgets for the private sector, multi-million-dollar companies or multi-billion-dollar companies? And that is the profile of these people. And Mike Bailey fits even more categories than that. Not only was he a financial head in cities, he now does this, what he's doing for us, helping cities get out of messes like this, and has done it all over the country and lots of times. So it's based on a national organization in their process. This is what happens if you ask a CPA to name something. It's the Government Finance Officers Association 12-step fiscal aid methodology. This is what happens if you ask them to make a graphic for it. So, it does tell you the 12 steps. But the bottom of it, it sort of tells you the path. That, you start in decline and like, oh gosh, we're slipping, and then you're into distress, and then it's like, okay, we got to stabilize ourselves. How do we recover, and then how do we become healthy again? And that circle off to the left is sort of about where we are currently in this process. So this is the path we're on. It's good to know in a situation like this that you aren't the only one in this kind of a situation. Our friends in Everett have about a $13 million gap in their funding. Seattle, I'm feeling a lot better about ourselves when I look at that number, $230 million. And then it's also, I think, good to know that 53 of the top 75 most populous cities in the country couldn't pay their bills in 2022. So this is going on nationally, and certainly we are experiencing some of the same things, but we also did some stuff to ourselves that they probably didn't do. Here are some of those impacts that you've felt at home that also impacted even before we made some of our decisions here. You all felt this at home, right? Between 2021 and 2024, the Consumer Price Index went up 21.7%. Things cost more. The state, however, would only allow us to increase our revenues from property tax by 1% a year. That's pretty much a recipe for a slow death. If your costs are going up by that kind of a pace and you can't increase your revenue by anywhere near that, then obviously you're headed to trouble. And then the state also imposed some requirements on us, many of which were good, right? Like, police cameras, a good idea. Public record requests, good idea. What they didn't do say is, and here's some money to help pay for that. So go do this, we're gonna make it the law, but now you gotta find a way to add those. And there are other examples of that, but those are other things that contributed to this without us necessarily having an impact on it. And I think it's important to have a sense of that. This is sort of a pathway. Green means good, red means not so good. It's sort of saying what I said before. This is where the blue ribbon panel sort of put us, sort of in the, we got to make some changes to our budget. And the things at the bottom sort of talk about who has sort of that role. So, here's what's going on, what's normal, what kind of actions does the administration have, and then where does the council step in. So now I'm going to talk about where we are. So that was sort of context. So here's where we are. So as you all recall, this is not new news. To balance the budget, there were two one-time uses of funds. One was the Regional Fire Authority. And so for those who don't understand, let me explain that City of Edmonds currently contracts with South County Fire for our fire and emergency medical services. We write a check. Other cities do it like we would do with the schools or with the library, where it's a separate levy and it doesn't come out of the general fund from the city. So we currently write a check for that. When the city was looking at, we have a gap, they spent ARPA money on lots of good stuff. I mean, a lot of good things happened with those funds that were provided to us by ARPA. An additional opportunity came that said, okay, we're in trouble, let's allocate $6.25 million to help write that check to the Regional Fire Authority, which we did. Keep in mind though, it's a one-time shot, right? Because we don't get that again. The other was, in the past, the city has experienced, right, like any business, in any organization, when there are openings, you save money because, during the time when you're trying to fill the positions, there's a savings going on. So at one point, the city had come up with a projection of around $3.2 million in a year for employee savings. So they plugged that as a number, saying, well, instead of leaving that open as we have in the past, let's just assume it's going to happen again. So let's assume we're not going to use that we're not going to fill those positions and we'll have $3.2 million. I will tell you that number isn't strong, but they made it on logic. It was made with logic and with good intent, but also the kind of thing that's not sustainable. So there is the reality of that. This 3.2 is a must make for this year. I mean, there's many, we need to reach beyond that, but because the budget was balanced with that assumption of 3.2, anything we aren't going to save through, hiring chills or open positions. We need to make that happen, and we're on a path to do it. I don't want to create doubt, but that's a must in terms of this year. So recognize that if you were to round up, those two things are $10 million, right? That is 20% of our budget. Our general fund is $50 million. Those two things are 20% of our budget, not a little thing. In addition to that, other things took place after the budget was approved, and all made for good reasons, but they had an impact of around another $3 million. So one of the things we do is we negotiate contracts with our unions. Frequently, that negotiation doesn't happen till after the year ends. So when you balance a budget and you know it's going to happen, you can sort of use a plug number, but you don't really have that real number until the end of the year, so you're starting the year already with a hole. We bought some police cars. There were other things. This is just a partial list, but a number of things happened that also impact further our general fund. And so the combined of those two right now is about $12.5 million. In addition to that, we spent into our reserves $8 million. So we have a policy that says, here's your general fund. In addition to that, we want you to, of that, we want a certain percentage to be used as a reserve fund. And then there's even a smaller percentage at the bottom that says that's a contingency reserve when things get really, really bad. But we have gone into that reserve fund $8 million. So you can see the size that, you can add it up. It's 20 million. It's a big hole. What I'm going to primarily focus on tonight, though, is this $12.5 million. It does fit a different criteria because there is a bigger sense of urgency related to that than, in some ways, the $8 million. So that's the where we are, right? That's the answer to where we are. The next part of this equation is how did we get here? So the path to January 1st looked something like this. And first, there's sort of an interesting good news, bad news. So the good news was our revenues over 4 years grew 7% annually, or 27.8%. How cool is that? Sadly, we decided to spend at a pace much faster than that, at almost 45%, or 11.2%. Obviously, that contributes to things as well. We also hired staff for good reasons. It was all made for logical reasons. And in addition to that, what the city recognized was that, we were not being necessarily externally competitive for staff or internally equitable, and we needed to fix that. So we also made some choices so that we could be competitive and be appropriately treating staff. So staff increase as well as these other kinds of compensation things. This is a line. So imagine that line is a perfectly balanced budget, right? Revenue, expenses, all is right in the world. If you don't spend everything that you have in revenues, you're up above that line and you've got savings and you're in the black. If you spend more than that, you're down below that line and you're in the red. Blue is beautiful. So what happened was, in the last 4 years, this is the budgets that were approved. So budgets were approved, and I know the numbers are hard to read. It goes from like 1.9 million over in 2019 up to like 5.7 million over here in the most recent one. So budgets were approved beyond revenue. What happens in all cities is after a budget is approved, staff and council, there's stuff that maybe didn't carry over from last year that is still worth doing and it didn't necessarily get in the budget, and so there's an amendment. Or council will say, here is something we ought to invest in, so you amend the budget. Or staff will come and say, here's a really important need. Can we have some amendments? And so you amend the budget. And here's what happens when we did. So the 1.8 went to 3 million. The 5.7 went to 11 million. Another thing that impacted this is, right, when you do a budget just like you do at home and you want to spend your money, it's like, well, but how much are we going to have, before we buy the ship or the trip or the boat, right? So what is our revenue? And so you project based on that. Can we afford it? We missed. So 3 out of the last 4 years, we missed on our projections. And lots of reasons for that. And you make projections with good intention, but we missed. And anywhere from 1.6 to 3.4 million in the last 3 out of 4 years. This graph is sort of interesting in that The outline blue line is the same. It's the same as I showed you before, the amended budget. The orange budget is what we actually spent. So what that tells you is we actually underspent the approved budget. So it wasn't that, oh, you went screaming past what was approved. It's just what the budget was. But we did not go screaming past, as a city, what the budget was. So this is our reality, right? This is the page we're starting on. Again, it's not about blame. A lot of things contributed to this. Some are our own choices. Some we are victims of the same thing that others in the country are. But this is our reality. For perspective, and the mayor of Linwood is here, so I'll pick on her a little bit now. So this is a comparison of several cities, and I'll explain. One, the adjusted for RFA and library levy. So we write a check for fire. Not every city does, right? So let's take that off the table. We have a library. Not everybody pays for their library in the same way we do, so let's take that off the table. So now it's sort of an apples to apples comparison. Assessed value is, here is everything in the city, your house, my house, everything in the city. What is the assessed value of that? So that is our assessed value as a city. If you wanted to buy Edmonds, this is what it'll make us an offer. Our populations, right, that's obvious. The general fund revenue, so for each of those cities, that's what their general fund revenue is. Property tax, the percent from tax, and per capita. So right now I'm going to just primarily hit the wrong button and talk about Edmonds and Linwood, in part because I want to pick on the mayor, but also because our populations are very similar. So you can see 43 to 40,000. Our assessed value is higher than theirs. Neener. But if you look at the general fund revenue, our general fund revenue is $50 million. Theirs is close to just hugging $80 million. Now look at where it comes from, right? Of our 50 million, a little over 15 million comes from our property tax. And they only 4.5 million comes from their property tax. They have lots, they have them all. They have Perrinville. They have lots of other, that was an inside joke, I wanted her to give us Perrinville. So you can see the reliance that we have on property tax. 31% of our general fund comes from that source. Whereas if you have this much more diverse revenue stream, it isn't quite as impactful. And then you can also see the per capita cost for each of us. Sort of interesting. In addition to everything that we're doing in the city, there's other stuff on our plate. And it's not little stuff. So this year, right, we will have to make a decision this year, and you all will have to vote on it probably next year on how do we want to handle our regional fire. So as I mentioned, we contract for our fire service. And that was supposed to go till 2030. We and the Regional Fire Authority had the option to call the contract and give 2 years notice. They decided to do that. So the clock's running. So we have to decide, do we join the regional, South County Regional Fire Authority? Do we build our own? We own the fire stations. We used to have a fire. Do we contract with somebody else? We have to look at options. And council last year said, we got to make sure that this is a wise decision, and contracted with an organization to do that analysis so that council and all of us can have some confidence in saying, this is how we have to deal with our fire and our emergency services, our emergency medical services. And it's something everybody will have to vote on, but spoiler alert, it'll cost more whatever the decision is. But it's a big decision how we do that. We're in the middle of our comprehensive plan. The landmark property is still in play. I think all of us would like to marsh to be an estuary, the Union 76. We are still trying to make 99 and want to make 99 a cool neighborhood. The wastewater treatment plant, as you might have heard, has a problem or two. We're needing to update our codes, and I'll talk more about these last two in a minute, the building maintenance and road maintenance. But there's also all that stuff on the right side. The community members it's really important to all of us that we address all of these kinds of things, and that list is much longer. But those are other things that take money and that we as community members want addressed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about facilities. I'm sort of the belief, if you have something, maintain what you have. That if it breaks in the future, or if you don't maintain it, it'll cost you more in the future because the problem gets worse. So don't try to read this. These are our buildings. And this is their status. What I do want you to look at is that graph over in the right that has the bold colors. And green says it's excellent to good. The yellow says it's good to fair. The orange says fair to poor. And the red says poor to critical. Notice we don't have any green or yellow. So those are all of our buildings and basically the condition of maintenance that they're in and what that needs. And the longer you wait, the worse it gets. And part of the reason for that is, you know what happens if you keep a car for a really long time or a house for a really long time? It needs stuff. Stuff breaks. And 67% of our assets are over 23 years old. That's our reality. Roads. Similar problem, right? There is science that says if you maintain a road this frequently, then you're going to stay even. And there is science that tells you that. So I've come up with this quote. I hope you will all remember it forever. The time does not make a pothole smaller or cheaper to fix. Mike Rosen, 2024. It is my truth. So in 2018, the recommendation, we do an analysis. Literally every foot of our 130 miles of road are taken pictures of every few years. We know exactly what the problems are with our roads. And in 2018, when it was done, the recommended investment was $2.5 million for that year. What we spent was, on an average over 5 years, is $1.5 million. Our roads are in worse condition than they were in 2018. No pun intended, we've continued to kick that can down the road, and there you go. So this is a graphic that says what I just said. If you spend money, here's what it costs you, and you're going to live up here. If you don't, it's going to cost you more, and you're going to live down here. Things I believe to be true. This isn't a one-year problem. This is also an all-hands problem. This is, I can't fix this, council can't fix this. This is going to take all of us. Staff, the community, council, the mayor. This is an all-hands issue. I also believe you can't do more for less. We can't even do the same for less. What we have to do is figure out what we need to do fewer things, and do them better. When I'm in situations like, and analyzing problems like this, especially when it comes to money, I sort of look at everything and sort of start the question of what's the must list? Like what rises to the top? These are the things you have to do. And what are things maybe, yeah, we don't have to do it. And then it's, okay, can we do, of the things we have to do, can we do them differently? Can others do them? Like, are they better at it? Is that their core competency? Do we outsource it? What can be done by others? Can we do it later? So yeah, maybe we have to do it, but maybe that one we can postpone. And then what is that gap, and how do we fix it? We all get our property tax, open the envelope, and groan. The reality is, and I know there are people out there who go, what is the city doing with all my property tax? So this dollar, for every dollar you pay in property tax, this is what we get, 14 cents. So you write it and you think that the city is getting all this money. For every dollar in property tax you spend, this is our portion of that. We get a little bit of over 14 cents to spend. It's a similar story when you look at sales tax. Every dollar you spend on sales tax, you're going to pay 10.5 cents for sales tax, but we're going to get less than a penny. So these are the realities of our current revenue streams. Two pretty healthy revenue streams that we need to. So if you're going to put this in sort of a bigger bucket, ultimately we need to change our culture. We need to have this balance of, what is it we must do? What is it we want to do? What are the real costs of that? We need to have balance in all of these kinds of things, because see what happens when we don't have balance. And then we get really ornery. So here's sort of a strategic path and timeline. And I'm going to talk more about some of this stuff. So right now we're in it. We got to save money, right? How do we get through 2024? At the same time, we got to come up with a strategy to how do we start replenishing those reserve funds. So we need to come up with a plan and look at those reserve funds and say, okay, how are we going to do it, and look at that over. And then we also need to develop a strategy to bridge 2025, because Those numbers, right, going back to that first, where are we now, is one-time money. That ARPA money, we aren't going to have that next year. That 3.2, will keep us in a state like this. Those other things that were added to it that I mentioned that also contributed to where we are. So we need a path. This year we'll get through it, right, because the council did balance the budget. But what about next year? So high on the priority list is, what is our strategy to get through 2025? Then also, in starting this year and going into next year, introducing two completely different approaches to how we do things. So budget priorities, and this is not, we aren't inventing this. It is a process where you do sit down with the community and you have this conversation. What is it we want? What are our priorities? You give them rankings and take the emotion out of it, and you decide what are the critical elements in service. I personally, one on my list, I like water to show up and I like it to go away when I'm done with it, Things like that. What are the things that are on the top of the list? And you prioritize and then you budget based on those kinds of priorities. Then zero-based budgeting, what typically happens in an organization is you look at last year's budget and say, oh, inflation was this, so I want more. And you just budget based on your previous year's budget. This says, no, we're going to sort of start from zero. So if you want parks, let's talk about that. And you need to sort of defend, here's the cost, here's what that metric is, here how that stands up against the other things. And you don't assume that all budgets remain the same year to year. So you start from this assumption of it may go away. So we're budgeting by priorities and we're not assuming that the money's going to carry over. And then of course, always continue to identify savings. And then we need to make a decision about fire. So that will start to happen in 2024 and then be resolved in 2025. And we need to do that. And that is a very critical element of our decision making. Then using the new budget system, future needs, now we're going to have a better handle on that gap, on that long-term gap to get to sustainability. And then keep saving money. And then what kind of revenue streams do we need? So some of the questions, these, you would ask these as well. What do we really want? What are the metrics? Can we ensure equity? That's a concern that we have been expressing throughout the community. What staff do we need for that? What kind of amenities do we need? Are these the right buildings? Is this the right structure? What does it cost to maintain this? So taking a hard look at all of this and into the future. So here are some immediate actions, and I'm going to talk about each of these four buckets. Reducing expenses, changing the budget process, changing our procedures, increasing revenue. So here's stuff that's going on now. So the 3.2 million plus, so there's the hiring chill. Nobody gets a pass. I am the only one authorizing any positions to be filled. We are eliminating some programs. We have stopped some purchases. We've altered and continue to look for different rental things that we're renting. Can we eliminate them or do them differently? We're reducing some of our professional services, considering an organizational restructure. Can we do things more efficiently, more effectively? Is there any money savings in it? Reducing our overtime. Can we collaborate with others? Let's share the cost so we aren't paying the full load. Exploring outsourcing. Can somebody do this better, cheaper? Is that their core competency and not ours? And then risk reduction. We'd rather our buildings didn't fall over or our people didn't get hurt. So how can we make a safer place, which not only is a good thing to do, but can also save you money? I talked about some of this, but the budgeting process. A couple years ago, council made the decision to go to a new software program, which is going to be much more robust and much better. And I think we're all eager to sort of be in that and to benefit from this new software. We're going to biennial budget. There are many advantages to that, even though I just talked about zero-based budgeting. A lot of our programs go more than 1 year. And so it's nice to be able to look at that as well and sort of anticipate the future and target the future. And at the same time, it's not as heavy a lift where you're sort of shutting down all that staff time and council time to do that full lift every year, even though you're going to do course correction along the way. The budget structured by service. So this sort of goes back into how we think about what we do. So when you budget by department, that's the lens you look at it through. If we talk to the community about what's really important to you, what is it you want the community to provide you, and you say, we want safety. So all sorts of our departments touch safety. If you talk about green spaces and a healthy environment, all of our departments touch that. So if we think about it and in some way shape our budget around these services, and then budget towards it. Now we're not operating in silos, and we can talk to the community about, here is the investment we made in the environment. Here is the investment we made in safety for you. And because it's also about the things that are important to you, and then it also forces us to budget that way and structure internally that way to service that, and to have metrics that you all feel are appropriate, because it's all about choices. Do you want the ambulance to show up in 2.5 minutes, or is 8 minutes okay? Or do you want them to carry blood, or is it okay if they don't, right? It's all choices. We will have, as a part of this process, and this will be going on very, very shortly, we anticipate, and council will be talking about this Tuesday. But if this does continue to advance in this path, we would like to put 4 to 6 community meetings out there for, this doesn't mean the same person goes to 6 meetings. This means 4 to 6 meetings for other people, each of us, to fill, and to start this process in talking about this. We also, in the past, we have had conversations about engaging citizens more. We have 14 boards and commissions. But what we haven't talked about is engaging the citizenry in this process. And the thought is to have a citizen advisory group that would help navigate through this budget process as well, so that there is confidence that we're interpreting what the community is saying correctly, and that we are making decisions that are consistent, and then that they can, in the same way the Blue Ribbon panel can stand up and say, we have faith, I hope they can say that we have faith in this process, we have faith in the advice we gave, and we stand by what you're hearing in the process in front of you. So we're thinking that would make sense. Union contracts, you negotiate with a union. Usually they end at the end of the year. Council, in good faith, passes a budget, and they know that contract isn't signed yet. So as soon as that contract is signed, your budget's out of whack. You can put in a plug number, but you don't know what the real number is going to be till negotiation's over. So imagine if we could get those contracts to end like in June. Then we have the real numbers, and we don't spend all the money, and we're doing it with real information. So working with the unions on that kind of stuff. Modifying our schedule so we aren't, in the last hours and days of December at 10:30 at night trying to, meet our obligations to get a balanced budget. Our capital improvement plan, trying to get that in sync with the budgeting process. Doing monthly budgeting, I know that sounds intuitive, but we aren't doing that. Somebody from home is saying Rosen's. So, where you sit down and work with every department and say, this is your budget and your expenditures every month, and then you meet every month and say, okay, how did you do and why if you didn't do? You would think that would go on, and it's not. Doing a very robust mid-year review, so not only would we track monthly more accurately, but do a robust mid-year so that you can course correct before it's too late. Creating dashboards, so it's easy for all of us to look and sort of get a snapshot very quickly, and you don't have to go through those hundreds of pages of numbers to just get a snapshot of where we are and how we're doing in a way that's easy to consume. Budget process. Procedures. So, work with council to develop a cash flow policy. One of the realities of Edmonds cash flow is our expenses may be somewhat predictable in sort of an even path throughout the year, but our property tax come in twice, right? We get 2 really big checks. So you can imagine from a cash flow, you still got to spend money, but it's going to be like this because you don't have that revenue but twice a year. So we need to make sure that we have a good cash flow policy. We need to, and we are currently in the process of writing a new procurement policy. And I'll say it out loud, we don't have a centralized procurement procedure, and we will fix that. We also don't have a centralized contract retention and monitoring program. We will fix that. The decision packets. So council makes a lot of information based on the information they are provided, and they need good information to make good decisions. So we are modifying, and has just sent it out to start being used, where when council is being asked to make a decision, there will be, here's the background information, this is why this is in front of you, here is a recommendation, here's why it's the recommendation, but here are the alternatives and the pros and the cons, and here is the budget implications. So if council decides to spend something that's beyond, they will also be beyond what the budget will accommodate. They'll be, that will be part of the conversation. What would you like to take away, or how do we identify a new revenue source? But they won't go forth without having that kind of information. And then having timely, clear, and consistent reporting, obviously. Increasing revenue. So currently things that we can do that are immediate, we can adjust our rental and concession rates, we can adjust our program fees, we can review our investment policy. Now, every dollar you send to the city is a very precious jewel, and we have to protect it. And we can invest it, and it's invested incredibly safely right now. But this just suggests, let's make sure that there aren't other opportunities that are as safe, but maybe we can get a bigger return. So we're looking for those kinds of opportunities as well. And then, why would we ever pay for something that somebody else is willing to write a check for? So can we be much more aggressive in terms of our solicitation for grants? And then based on all of that, right, because this is all going to give us different information and give us this, I was just sort of reading the room here, sorry. So all of this will give us a better place of where we are, and then we'll be able to say, okay, this is where we're going, here's what we can do through savings, here's what our procedures are, here's what our priorities are. Now, is there a gap, and what does that look like? So I'm going to, that was a lot, and I realized it was a bit of a buzzkill, but I hope, I hope it was helpful, but I do want to introduce you to Mike Bailey, and then I'm also going to ask Vivian Olson to say a couple of words. And I'm going to hand you this.
Thank you. I think the mayor just wants to take a breather for a second, and I can certainly understand that. First of all, let me say that you see CPA next to my name. I'm actually retired my CPA license. So for all of you CPAs who are into compliance and whatnot, if you look me up on the site, it'll say CPA retired. So just that caveat. Meaning I don't no longer have to file the reports about my continuing education. But the mayor didn't know me before December. And I get this, I think it was an email that said, I understand you've worked with the city before, I understand you know a little bit about city finances, can we get together? And so we met at a cafe, and I learned he was new to this and now understood he was inheriting some of these challenges, and wondered if we might be able to talk about how we could help find a path forward that would be in the city's best interest. I've been very impressed with the mayor's candidness in his approach to finding solutions to the problems that exist, and reiterate, he's not talked at all about kind of who's out there to blame, or it is not about blame. It's about let's find the right path forward. He identified, and you've met the panel that we've been working with. Again, excellent professionals that have the credentials that have really informed a lot of what you've heard this evening. The mayor's been very attentive. He's attended every meeting. He's taking furious notes, and many of those notes you've seen this evening already. In my experience, in fact, I was finance director of the city of Linwood some years ago, retired as finance director after 40 years in finance, local government finance leadership in 2018, then worked with the Municipal Research and Services Center, where my job was to go out and help local governments who were having fiscal distress resolve those issues. And I've seen much worse. So the good news is you've got lots of hard-working, dedicated employees out continuing to provide service to the city. It's an excellent city. The city's in great shape. It's a matter of kind of righting the ship and setting the path forward so that we can continue to provide those kinds of services that the community has come to appreciate and enjoy going forward. And putting those policies and processes in place that will enable that to continue to be the case. And again, you've heard that from the mayor, that's been his focus, and that's what we're focusing on with the Blue Ribbon Panel. As the mayor mentioned, my first opportunity to kind of dive deep into this with the council will be next Tuesday, and there'll be a lot of difficult decisions to make for both the council and the community here in the next year plus. And our work will be oriented around trying to provide the best possible information we can to enable those decisions to be the best they can be as well. Again, for the purpose of resolving the situations that exist today, but also setting things in place for a long-term, healthy fiscal environment that will enable the city to continue to thrive and continue to be the place that reflects those pretty pictures and the kind of place that you all enjoy and love to call home. So that's a little bit about our work, and again, I look forward to continuing to support this effort. With that, I think Council President Olson.
First of all, thank everybody for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. This was a really important message. I thank the mayor so much for giving us the real truth and nothing but the truth. And it was an important download for everybody to have this understanding so that we know that we can move forward. I'm super proud to be representing the current sitting council. They are super hardworking and are every day put a lot of time into representing you. And I think along the lines, there's been a lot of collaboration and cooperation this year with the new mayor and all the work that we're doing to deal with the situations that we have and to enjoy Edmonds as we always have and to figure out how to move forward as a community with your input and engagement. Most importantly, there have been several things mentioned already in terms of those meetings that are going to happen, but your council at the retreat really prioritized that community engagement. So whether that's a phone call to us or an email, we are also scheduling some town halls. We expect to have 3 of them this year. The very next one is going to be April 18th, and we will kind of set out an expectation for what we think the topics are going to be, but you really can speak to anything, but there probably will be 2 or 3 topics, and obviously our financial situation will probably be one of them that you might want to be heard on. So with no further ado, I will give it back to the mayor, and thank you so much again for the message.
Thank you. So as I started, I do see this as an opportunity. We're going to have to do some hard work, but it's a great opportunity to right the ship and make some good decisions for the future. So I am, as much as it hurts to go through, we will be better on the other side of it. I mentioned earlier that I wasn't going to be taking questions, but a reminder that Council President Olson just mentioned and Mike Bailey just mentioned that the council is going to start rolling up their sleeves on April 2nd. So that's where we're going to start doing even more of the work. I do want to thank the Blue Ribbon panel. As Mike Bailey said, everything on here was their work. And they, that's what I loved about it too. It was just, they just said it, right? There was no emotion. Here's the thing. Here's what you got to do. Here are the realities and the numbers. Here are the pathways out. Every week they just sat down and did it. I will be at the Edmonds Civic Roundtable in this room on April 4th, as I mentioned, and an opportunity to talk about this further if you want, or other kinds of things, and then the community meetings that I mentioned we're going to create, and then as Council President Olson mentioned as well, that council is intending to have. I absolutely, positively believe we're going to get through this. I am not breaking a sweat, but it's going to take us all working together to do that. There is a lot to, everything we loved about Edmonds was that when you walked in the door is still true. We love this place. Everybody here that lives here chose to live here, and for a lot of the same reasons. We love this place. I am incredibly grateful for your interest. There are cities that would give anything. Anybody out there? Anybody care? Anybody paying attention? We have an incredibly engaged citizenry, and that's how this is going to work, because we're going to sit down and we're going to chart a path and we're going to create a vision and we're going to get there. And I promised you 2 more pretty pictures to remind you about how much we love about Edmonds. This is one. Not nice, right? Think the place, this corner of the planet that we live in. How lucky are we? And then, of course, the bubble guy, right? The bubble guy and fairies. So with that, I thank you for being here, and we can all go to a bar now. Have a good evening.